Hey everybody, here's another short screencast on how to get the most out of your Onenote experience. So let's have a look at the assignment. And in question number 1, you're required to complete a histogram using the data that's given in this particular list here. So a second way to go about this, okay, you likely saw part 1, but a second way would be the following. So what we're going to do is on the school's network, that is on the tablet computer, what you can do is you can open up, now I have this already pre-installed as an app, but you can find it under Math Tools. So I'm going to use something called Fathom. So we'll open up Fathom. You can see if the computer's working here. There it is. So Fathom is a statistical software. Okay, and it's great for a number of things, but what we're going to do is we're going to pull down what we call a collection. Okay, and in that collection, we're going to deposit the data. So let's go back into our assignment page. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the data from the list and specifically from the table. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to head back into Fathom. And then on the collection box, I'm going to right click and it's going to provide different options. And what I'm going to do is paste cases. So each case is a piece of data. So you can see that the box has now been filled. So with that box highlighted, what I can do is I can grab a table, pull that into the workspace, and automatically it maps the data into the chart. Now you're welcome to title that or what have you. So I think what we'll do is that these represent, back to the assignment, what is the variable here? Travel times. So we'll go in and we'll rename the collection as travel times. Okay, so you can see how it's been changed. And then the attribute, this here is the frequency, right, of the different travel times. So I'll call it frequency. So with that highlighted, what we'll do now is grab a graph, drag that in, and then go back to your table. And notice how when I hover over top of the column label or the title, it turns into a hand. So you can click and grab that column of data and drag that over to the horizontal axis. And when you release that, it's going to provide you with what is called a dot plot. Okay. So in the drop-down menu, you're going to have a variety of different plots. And what we need is a histogram. Okay, so I'm going to increase the size of the graph to make it a little more visible. Okay, now it creates a histogram, which is very uniform, but doesn't really display that much of a trend. So what we can do is we can, between the columns or the intervals, is you notice how the mouse changes. So you can drag that in such a way to remove, if possible, some of the gaps. So removing the zero groups, and you can rescale everything so that you can clearly see the graph. Another thing too is you can probably notice down here that each interval or the bins aren't necessarily starting and stopping on a whole number. Now that isn't always necessary, but for the reader it makes it difficult to interpret the graph. So if we double click on the graph space, it'll bring up what we call an inspector. So have a look at the bin width. Okay, it's labeled as 1.96 and so on. What you can do is you can manipulate that any way you like. So if I set it at a bin width of say 2 and just round it up, and I start my smallest value at 13, by pressing enter, okay, it's going to adjust the bin width. Okay, now if I'm not happy with where it's starting, I could then set the lower end to be at 16, and now you can see the graph is slowly mapping into where I need it to go. Okay. Other options too, you can play around with the bin width to see what effect that has, but you can quickly see that it does quickly change the graph. something that may or may not be appropriate. Okay. Last but not least, how do I get this back into OneNote? Well, making sure that the graph is highlighted. And what you can do is under the edit menu is copy it as a picture. Now with that on the clipboard, head on back to OneNote, and you can either delete that template over top of it or just underneath. I'm going to paste the image I've copied into OneNote, and then I might have to resize things a little bit in order to make sure that my graphic shows up clearly. Okay, so that's another way that you can successfully create a histogram and then bring that into OneNote.